I've had the opportunity to hear a variety of incredible travel stories since I began podcasting, but my guest today has an adventure story unlike any other. Today on the podcast, I have fellow U.S. Marine Matt Littrell joining me to share his story about how he traveled overland from Camp Lejeune in North Carolina to Camp Pendleton in California, and he did this all while riding on the back of a horse. Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Josh Guerrero, and I'm the host and founder of this podcast, which is simply titled the All-Around Adventure Podcast. Whether you're tuned in for the first time or if you've been listening for a while now, I certainly do want to welcome you here. And as always, I want to thank you for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, and there's also a lot out there on the internet these days that's trying to get your attention and distract you. But it just means so much to me that you've chosen to download and listen to this podcast. Now, if you are in fact new to this podcast and you're not entirely sure what we're all about here, this is the show where you hear amazing tales from afar and get the all-important life lessons that go along with them. And those would be stories from myself, as well as the amazing guests that I welcome on this podcast. And I am talking with travelers of all kinds. I am talking with warriors, entrepreneurs, digital nomads, best-selling authors, bloggers, adventurers, philanthropists, you name it. If they have a fantastic travel story to tell with some great life lessons to share, it's my job to seek them out and bring them on this podcast and extract these stories and life lessons through powerful conversations to help you level up in your life. And I have a fantastic guest joining me today. For today, I'll be talking with fellow Marine Corps veteran Matt Littrell. Now, a few years back, Matt set out on this amazing journey where he decided to ride a horse all the way from Camp Lejeune along the Atlantic coast, all the way across the country to Camp Pendleton along the Pacific coast. But leading up to this journey, though, he faced many demons in his head following his time in the Marine Corps, and he found himself looking at his pistol with thoughts of ending it all. And this made him think about just how many other veterans out there might be struggling with the same thing. Therefore, he made the decision to mount his horse and take on this incredible journey that he calls the Long Trail Home in order to raise money for the Semper Fi Fund to help his fellow veterans. And following his journey, he continued to be of service to other veterans, and he opened the Valhalla Ranch in Colorado, where he welcomes veterans to come and ride horses and do other great activities. And in this episode, he shares this story with us all, talking about some of the highlights that he experienced throughout this journey, as well as some of the low points and what he is doing to continue to serve his fellow veterans. I tell you what, everyone, this was just an incredible conversation. I had a great time chatting with Matt and hearing his story, and you can also really hear the passion in his voice when he talks about the things that he shares today, and I just can't wait to share this with you all now. So that's enough from me. Let's just go ahead and get right into this, and without further ado, this is my conversation with Matt Littrell. All right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All-Around Adventure Podcast, and I'm excited to be joined by fellow U.S. Marine Corps veteran Matt Littrell today. Matt, what's going on, brother? Thanks so much for taking time for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Oh, you bet, man. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I was looking forward to this conversation. You and I just kind of got connected recently through some, mutual acquaintances, other fellow Marines out there, and, you got a pretty interesting story, and you've kind of done some amazing adventures that are pretty unique that I've never heard of before, but we'll certainly get into that. But, as I like to start all my guest episodes with, I like to go back to the beginning first just to kind of learn a little bit more about you. And I'm sure my guests would be, my audience would be a little bit more interested in learning about you too. So take us back to, when you first went into the Marine Corps and what kind of led you down that path.
So I, like a lot of kids, I went to college right after high school. I went to the University of Kansas, and I remember hanging out, on the intramural rugby team, and there was some Army veterans on there, and they're like, "Dude, you should be a saw gunner. That's what you are. You're a saw gunner." And I was like, "I don't even know what that is." And so I was really, really good at the party aspect of the rugby team and college. and not so great at the actual go to class thing. So, I just wasn't ready mentally to go to college. So I, squeaked out of there with my GPA started with a point. So I didn't even last the entire first semester after, just normal stuff that happens in the barracks. It shouldn't happen in like a dorm room setting. They frown upon those things. So I got out of there, and my grandpa, he was a Marine. He was Peleliu, Okinawa.
Oh wow!
Yeah, bad dude.
Badass.
Yeah. So it was just kind of a natural thing. I always kind of felt the pull to the Marines, and so then June of 2001, I pulled the trigger on that and walked in there, and I was a recruiter's wet dream. I walked in, I'm like, yeah, I want to go infantry, and I want to go today. And he's like, we can make that happen. So actually, I wound up in the delayed entry program and didn't go to boot camp till December 2001. So while I was in the delayed entry deal, 9/11 happened.
Right.
Which that definitely added another deal to it, another aspect, which, was, man, it was like, this is the right time. So especially then. And I think a lot of guys that I was in with joined, September 12th, September 13th. And, they were looking for retribution. And I think we were kind of an older group, we were 20. And, but I think there's a lot of maturity that happens between 18 and 20. At the time, I thought there was. Now it's like you're all just a bunch of dumbass kids. But, we had a little bit more life experience. And so, yeah, we went to boot camp then December 2001. And then after that, SOI and all that nonsense. And then got stationed with Golf 2-5 out of Pendleton. So,
gotcha. So going into boot camp, especially coming like this close off of 9/11, I'm kind of curious, what was kind of sort of like the attitude of your drill instructors? Because I think just months after having, this event happen, I imagine maybe the drill instructors felt that their job was just suddenly all that much more important to make, outstanding Marines and everything like that. Did you kind of maybe observe that amongst your drill instructors? Like kind of what was your boot camp experience like there?
The whole boot camp experience, somebody told me before I went in, everything's a game and nothing you do is right. And just play the game.
That's accurate.
And, oh, God, yeah. I mean, there's nothing you do correct and everything's a game. And I'm a huge smartass. And so boot camp was hilarious. I mean, these drill instructors, they are comedic geniuses. And, for me, I didn't think boot camp was that hard. You sleep 8 hours a night. You get fed 3 meals. You got to run and stuff. But growing up here in Colorado, we're, over a mile above sea level. And you go down to sea level, and when you take a breath, you actually get a full breath. So it was something crazy. But it was just, they're going to yell at you. You're going to do push-ups. Life's going to suck, but you're going to sleep and eat. So it was way better than the fleet where, I feel like drill instructors had rules. And, when you get to the fleet, especially back then, it was before all the hazing rules and all that stuff. And I still don't think I was hazed. It was just, good training. And, but that whole 8 hours of sleep, yeah, that didn't happen. Chow happened when it happened. And, the fleet was legit, cause that was where our guys, our seniors, man, we had a great group of seniors and they beat our asses nonstop. But they made us prepared to go overseas, which was the goal. I mean, we were going overseas and we were going to war. These are things that they weren't just hypotheticals anymore. This is happening. And so I think we took it really damn serious, and our seniors did too. And, granted, we had a couple bags in there that, they were just crappy Marines to begin with and taking out all their aggression, and, then you go overseas, come back and you're salty now. And those guys just kind of fade in the distance and you realize just what they are. but for the most part, our seniors were great. But they did not take it easy on us, which we came back. So that counts.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people from the outside will look at either very tough drill instructors in the military or very tough, seniors out in the fleet and things like that, though, too. But then you kind of see just how the Marines, or going back to boot camp, the recruits, like how they are, like at the end of it all. And you just can't think that, it can't just be a coincidence, right? Like, for instance, I don't want to brag, but in boot camp, my platoon was honor platoon. And my senior drill instructor was the devil. And
yeah,
because I remember we had done something wrong, just maybe a minor thing wrong. And what he made us do is, by the way, really quick, did you go to Parris Island or San Diego?
San Diego.
Okay. So when we were getting ready to go to phase 2, because I went to San Diego as well, and we were getting ready to go to Pendleton for the month there for second phase, we actually had to load the entire company's sea bags onto the back of the trucks. Like, basically all the other platoons are just sitting still, just watching us as we're running back and forth, loading up all these sea bags into the back of the truck, because our senior drill instructor, wanted to torture us. But
yeah.
at the end of boot camp, though, we excelled in so many things. We excelled in, the final PFT. We excelled in drill, and, we were honor platoon. So there definitely is something to be said when you have those leaders that are just willing to kind of put you through just a little bit more hell than what you think you might be able to endure.
Yeah. Yeah. And like my senior drill instructor, I grew up, white boy out here on the prairie, and it's not very diverse out here. And, Black Friday shows up and he walks in, and this guy is darker than night and like 6'7". And he's the scariest individual I've ever seen in my life. And he was awesome, man. He actually wasn't all that mean, but he had the others to be mean. But he was a great leader, and just a all around good template for what you want to be. We did have one drill instructor. He was like, I don't know, the second in charge, whatever. And it was Staff Sergeant Segredo. And this man, like, the drill instructors that just yell and scream and they're like, ah!
Right.
And he was quiet. And quiet was even scarier because the other guys, they'd thrash the piss out of you. But he would make it painful. Like, just sit there, watch TV, in the plank position on your elbows. And I mean, you'd be there forever. And I actually ran into him in the fleet. He was 1-5. He relieved us in Ramadi. And, so my lieutenant, I mean, these dudes, they showed up and they had gear, stacked a foot out of their chest rigs and everything. And my lieutenant, who I still talk to this day, he's one of my good friends. He had me take just leaders patrol out, platoon sergeant, team leaders, squad leaders. And, he had me jump every wall we came to, just, get them hung up, show them that there's too much gear. And, so we go through them, hanging them up on every wall. And then we, get into this one building to get overwatch, and it's nighttime. And so go through, clear the building, get up on the roof, and I'm first one out the door, and Staff Sergeant Segredo is in my patrol, and he's right behind me. Open the door to go out on the roof, nighttime. He turns his VLI on, or Surefire or whatever, and all of a sudden, I'm like the bat signal of Ramadi. And I'm like, this is not good. So I dropped to a knee and, just out of natural reaction, I light him up. I just turn that other thing up, and he does, he quick, he fumbles, turns it off real quick. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. And, cause I'm an E3, he's a E6 still. And so I just kind of mosey off to this corner and to get away from the impact area as much as possible. And, he never said a word about it. I was like, dude, that right there, like, he knew that he made a mistake, and he just accepted that, hey, this isn't Garrison, this is real. And that was a real critique. Never said a word about it. And right there, I got so much respect for that man, because he could have done the staff NCO nonsense. You're just a E3, you can't, and no, and you know what? It probably came back and may have saved somebody's life. So that's I yelled at my drill instructor story.
Well, that is pretty amazing, and it does show signs of a very good leader, being willing to take that, as Jocko Willink would say, that extreme ownership like that, recognizing that, yes, I was in the wrong there. Let me try to fix it now. So, and regardless of where the critique came from too, it's just the fact of the matter is he knew that you were correct in that matter.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, I mean, that was really cool on two fronts. That, I yelled at my old drill instructor and got away with it. And that he, saw that, and just that respect level went up so much higher, because anybody can dictate and give orders and give critique, but being able to take it, that's huge.
Definitely. Right on, man. So you're talking about Ramadi here. Now, for anyone who might not be too familiar with Ramadi in Iraq, it was just one of the most dangerous areas in Iraq, throughout this whole conflict. So just, I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit here, but coming back from that deployment to Ramadi, and maybe we'll go a little bit further to transition to civilian life. What was that transition like for you? Because here you are again in one of the most dangerous places in Iraq at the time, being at such a high op tempo this whole time too. And was it difficult coming back and transitioning to civilian life? And I guess maybe I'll say down regulating a little bit, if that makes sense. What was that like for you?
Yeah, man, that absolutely tough. That becomes real life. That's normal. Firefights every day, normal. Mortar attacks, normal. IEDs, normal. That becomes the new normal. And so coming back and, you being the only one that's just all keyed up and amped up, that sets you apart and removes you from society. And then we look at, these civilians that they're not living there. And I feel that as veterans so much, we sit there and we just throw scorn on these people and further alienate and isolate ourselves from them, which is exactly what I was doing, and we feel like, or I felt like I was better than, because I'd done this, because, I know what the world's like. I know how horrible things can be. And these people are soft. They have no idea, blah, 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 blah. And I got very isolated, and, couldn't find my place, couldn't find my purpose, couldn't find my mission. And in doing so, as we sink further and further into the rabbit hole, it was 2013 that it was actually New Year's Eve, 2013. Or going into 2013 rather,
right?
That I wound up sitting there, with a pistol on the table in front of me.
Oh man,
thinking about pulling the trigger and just being done with it. And so I felt so alone in that moment. So just, what's the point? I've already done the greatest thing I could possibly do. It's all downhill from here. Life's going to suck forever. And, I was sitting there, I was at my mom's house, and, I was the only one there. She was, I think, at my sister's or something. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about this. I'm like, this would destroy my family. And especially having her walk in and seeing that, it couldn't. So I made the decision not to. And I called up the VA crisis line. That's the place where we're supposed to go get help. And I get one of the people on the phone there, and they just read me a script. You could just tell they're punching the clock. It's New Year's Eve. There's things they'd rather be doing. Let's get through another call, and maybe I can go to the bar or something. And it was just that lack of give a damn that pissed me off, because I'd already made the decision that I wasn't going to do it. And, you know, I felt like I just needed to kind of talk through it. But I started thinking that there's another guy out there that picked up the phone that night that was still on the fence about it. And those people that were supposed to be there, that were supposed to give a damn, didn't. And it may have driven him over the ledge. And it pissed me off. And I went to bed mad. And I woke up pissed. But I woke up with this weird clarity of vision that I woke up and knew that I was going to ride horseback from ocean to ocean, Lejeune to Pendleton. And I just knew it. And I remember, you know, talking to my family about it. And, you know, my mom, she's like, I already sent my boy off to war, you know, and now I'm going to send him horseback across the United States. And she wasn't really on board. And she asked, what are you hoping to get out of this? And it was the only word I could see in my head, peace. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't much she could say to that. You know, of course, my dad is like, man, I wish I could go with you. And so that started that whole endeavor. And, you know, it was, I still had to get the horse. The one that I had at the time, he was getting older and he just wouldn't be able to make it. And so I wanted to do it on a Mustang. I'd worked with Mustangs in the past. You know, I'm a farrier, a horseshoer full time. And so I this one place where I go, there's a bunch of these Mustangs that the prisoners at Canyon City had actually trained. It's part of a program there. Huh. And so the prisoners name them all. So you get cool names like you get Scarface and all the, you know, Outlaw and this actually Scarface was the one that made me want to do it. Wanted to use a Mustang. This horse, he was nuts. You know, the Border Patrol had him for a while, and they couldn't handle him. So they sent him to this kids organization, which I had never quite understood. But crawling under Scarface to do his feet, those Mustangs, they are so in touch with our energy levels, our body language, everything, because that's how they survive. They're a prey animal. So, and we being predators, they are very in tune to how we are. It's how we survive, or how they survive. And so Scarface would be all jazzed up and amped up, and I would have to bring him down. And so doing some groundwork with him, you know, I could move this horse with just my eyes. And, you know, he was that in tune. And it was then that I knew that it had to be a Mustang. They're like us. You know, they had to fight for survival. They're on a different plane awareness-wise than a domestic horse. And I just felt this kinship with them. So I went out and I found this black Mustang named Crow. I named him Crow. And he had about 30 days of rides on him when I got him. So he wasn't broke. He wasn't trained. So that was up to me to do. And so it took about a year. Him and an old cowboy buddy of mine named Ray. And Ray helped me get him legged up and ready to do it. And as it was getting closer and closer to the day where I was going to step off, Ray, who's 70 now, he was 66 at the time, he said, I got a favor to ask you. What is it, Ray? He said, can I go with you? And I don't know if you've ever seen Lonesome Dove, but it's one of the greatest movies ever. You know, it's about these two old Texas Rangers that take first cattle drive to Montana. And it's Woodrow and Gus. I looked at him, I said, well, Woodrow, let's go to Montana. so we loaded up the horses, drove out to Surf City, North Carolina is where we started, just because it was going to be such a cluster to get on base and ride through base. So we wound up starting just south of Lejeune on May 1st, 2014. And I had our first 2 stops, our first 2 nights planned out. And that was it. And the rest of the time it was fragos all the way.
Just go with it, eh? Just go with it at that point.
Yeah, exactly. If you keep riding west, eventually you'll hit California.
You'll hit the ocean. Yeah, you just keep pushing west. Wow, that's amazing. Now, I was hoping I could also ask you just to give us maybe like a quick 101 on horse breeds. I'll admit this is definitely not my area of expertise. Now, but Mustangs though, are they kind of more built for this like long distance, I guess I'll say endurance based endeavors, or was it mostly strictly just for the connection that you felt with Crow that kind of led you to want to choose him for this journey?
They are because the Mustangs they're born wild. They are captured wild, so they tend to be a little bit more rugged than just your typical quarter horse. We've as people have really screwed breeding up, and we're trying to get them quicker, faster, sharper, more refined, and in doing that we've lost some things. Now we did have several quarter horses on the ride that were more kind of ranch bred type, rugged, deep chested, they can do it type horses. But the Mustang in and of itself they were just born to adversity. And so they tend to be a little bit tougher. And the other horses that we had on the ride were, they're quarter horses, but they were Hancock bred horses, which, the Hancocks have a reputation of they quit bucking when they turn 20. And they're hard headed, tough horses. And, so we needed that and they gave it to us. So those were the 2 main breeds that we had on the ride.
Gotcha. The way you describe Mustangs, they kind of sound like the Marines of the horse world, kind of sort of.
Exactly. And Crow, he's, he's an asshole. So, but he's my asshole. He is. He's got that gritty, tough mentality that you need in a horse to lay down 2,800 miles of horse tracks.
Right.
So, and he does really good as long as you ride him every day and, kind of keep him just a little bit tired, because as soon as he isn't, you better grab some leather because he's going to try you.
Well, it's really interesting how you are talking about your relationship with your horses during this trip, because, it's a synergistic thing. It takes both of you to make it happen. I think maybe some people have this illusion that, if you're the rider, you're controlling the horse, you're demanding the horse on what to do, but that doesn't really seem to be the case here. And I imagine that's not the case with any good rider either, is that it's a symbiotic relationship. You both work together to make this happen. Would that be accurate? Absolutely.
It's truly a partnership. And it's one based on trust. If you get that horse to trust you, he'll give you his heart and soul. If you try to, just train through fear and just mashing on him, just like going back to leadership in the Marine Corps, you had those leaders that just hammered. And when it got thick, they had ruled out of fear, and there wasn't that trust that you got my back. So in a horse, you have to establish that trust that I am here for you and I will save you when it comes down to it. And riding along the state highways, 2 feet off of the asphalt with logging semis going 65 mile an hour, 3 feet away from you, you need that trust. Mm-hmm. And that no matter what comes our way, I am your release. I am your safe spot. And there was a lot of preparation that went into that. Because that's not just something that you can take a horse and expect them to do. So that's a long process, and it took us a year to get there. And we could have done it quicker, but we also survived. So
right. So all is well that ends well, right? So
exactly.
Sure. All right. Outstanding, man. So this whole journey took about a year to plan before launching. And then you mentioned that you only had the first 2 days of the route planned out with still a couple thousand miles to go. So I guess I know we could probably take a couple episodes to break down this entire journey, but I guess I'll just kind of ask you, what were some of the key highlights that I remember? Any particular places that you stopped along the way that just really kind of resonated with you, or certain experiences that you might have had?
Yeah, the whole trip was life changing. It really was. And we would, wherever we landed that night, I put out on the Facebook page where we were trying to get to the next day, and every single day, somebody had a spot for us. And this one spot in Alabama, these two older gals set us up. It was this barn, this training facility, boarding facility. And so they set us up to ride in there, and we get there, and they had conned one of their friends into bringing me and Ray beer and pizza. And so this girl steps out of this truck, and she's holding beer and pizza, and she walks up, and I'm like, "You're the prettiest girl I've seen this entire ride." And she's like, "Yeah, I bet you've never said that one before." And so we started talking a little bit. And then we started talking a lot, and she winds up dropping everything down back there in Alabama, comes and joins the ride in Oklahoma, and she finished all the way to California with me, and then came back here to Colorado. We got married a year to the day after we met. Got a 2-year-old boy and just had a daughter on Monday.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thanks, man. So yeah, that was a pretty memorable stop. So, that definitely worked out. So you kind of mentioned that it wasn't uncommon for you to just arrive to a place at the end of the day after riding an entire day, putting it out there that you were there, asking for some help, and it seems like there was probably maybe just, if I read correctly, there was only maybe just a couple of nights that you actually weren't able to get someone to host you up. So what'd you kind of do like on like those days? Did you like pitch a tent, get a hotel? Like what'd you do there? No, we slept outside under the stars every single night. So we, as we left in the morning, I'd say where we wanted to be roughly, and somebody would always step up. And I think there was one night where we just landed in an open field. And it was 7 miles shy of the Mississippi River on the 4th of July. And we'd sat down, me and Ray sat down to have our 4th of July dinner of peanuts and hot water. And some people found out we were there. And this guy, Jerry Brown, showed up. And Jerry showed up with Mississippi barbecue and a cold beer. And he brought a couple cots with him, too. And it was funny. He's like, "I brought these cots for you." I'm like, "Oh, Jerry, we're fine. We got bedrolls and stuff." And he goes, "Boy, have you ever slept in the Delta before?" "No, Jerry, I haven't." He goes, "Do you like sleeping with water moccasins?" And, No, I don't, Jerry. He goes, "Take the cot." So we slept on cots that night. But people, they just find out. And, it was such a humbling deal, especially being the 4th of July and having people just come and find us and help us and give a damn. That's the key right there. Give a damn.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Because, kind of going back to what you mentioned earlier, when you kind of came back from your deployments and, you were having a hard time, I guess, relating, or maybe civilians you felt had a hard time relating to you. But then here you are on this journey and, people know what it is that you're out there doing. And, they know that you're doing this to help other veterans, and they're stepping up because they want to get involved and help too. So if anything, that's just got to bring maybe just like a little bit more hope to, these veterans who maybe are going through that tough transition. They're not sure where to turn to. So I imagine that just had to feel really good to share that aspect of your story as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the vast majority, they want to help. They just don't know how.
Right.
Which is understandable. I mean, how do you help? And, what I tell them is just show up. That's all you got to do. Show up. Mm-hmm. And, just being there, go sit with the guy, have a beer, have dinner with him, just be there. And that's the biggest thing in the world. And I think that's all you got to do. And that goes beyond the whole veteran civilian thing. That's just humanity. Just show up for each other.
Right. So. Absolutely. Awesome, man. All right. Well, those were some of the highlights, but I also know that, this is a long time out on the road to make it across the country. Surely you probably might have had a couple of challenges, misadventures that you probably faced along the way. Any of those come to mind?
Yeah. There was one real low spot. We'd made it to 29 Palms, and Kristen,
really
my
close.
Wife, yeah, and Kristen, my wife, she had brought a couple of horses on the ride too, and one of them was this stallion. He was a stud horse, and a real nice stud horse. And there in 29 Palms, he colicked, and when a horse gets colic, essentially it's an upset stomach, but they have no way to throw up or make it any better, so it can be life-threatening. And this turned into one of those life-threatening deals, and he actually got a twist in his gut. And when that happens, it shuts off blood supply. And so we took him into San Luis Rey, the vet clinic there, south of Oceanside, or southeast of Oceanside, and it's one of the top vet clinics there is. And they did emergency surgery on him, and they wound up taking out, I think, 16 feet of intestine.
Oh man!
And they put him back together. He made it through surgery, and that gut just never got talking again. It never got started again. So we wound up having to put him down.
Oh man!
And that was just 10 days shy of the ride, and that was a gut wrencher, because that was a hell of a horse. He was tougher than nails, and it sucked. It sucked bad, and that was probably the lowest point of the ride. It's just these horses, they're so powerful. I mean, they can kill you in a heartbeat and not even try to, and they're so tough. But at the same point, there are things in them that are so delicate that it sucked. And that was the only issue we had, and it was catastrophic. And it was tough. It was damn tough.
Right. Especially also since, the horses out there doing this with you, you all are having this shared experience together too. And then just being 10 days shy from the finish, not being able to finish together too. Man, that's awful.
Yeah. Especially going into this, we knew that because we were using horses, because we were using animals, there was going to be a lot of eyes, and there's always people, the PETA types and everything, that are going to be looking at any kind of misuse with the horse at all. And so we had to be really conscious of that and keep them in really good shape, which is why it took longer than, you read about these old West books, and they're like, yeah, we laid down 30 miles today, we'll hit 50 tomorrow. You do that for long enough, your horses are going to look ragged, and it's going to take a toll. And so we were, putting down 15, 20 miles a day, which is still a lot. Mm-hmm. But, we were feeding them just straight rocket fuel, and they were fit. They were looking great, muscled up, and we were really conscious of that. And to have that happen was that was a heartbreaker.
Yeah, I bet.
But,
well, Well, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, that, again, you're forming, close relationships built out in trust with these horses too. And I think that probably also makes sense why you didn't have like a fully planned out route because I think if you had a planned out route, you'd probably say, yeah, we'll be here on this day. We'll make it to this many miles tonight. But the thing is, it's like, you didn't want to push the horses that much at the same time too. If, you needed to be flexible, it's just, if you think that maybe the horses need a rest, you're going to stop and, you're going to let them rest. You're going to feed them, do what you need to do. So it's an interesting dynamic with a journey like this because, you're not going by a motor operated vehicle that, you can reach a certain milestone on certain days or whatever. This is a very unique situation, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, you go to what they can handle, and you know your horses so well that you're able to make those decisions and really look out for their well-being first and foremost. I mean, that it was their well-being that got us there. They were the vehicle, and without your horse, you're nothing. So, I got to take care of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of fast forwarding to when you actually did make it to Camp Pendleton on the California coast. Again, obviously this is just, a week and a half after, what had happened in around 29 Palms. But just how were you kind of feeling once you actually had completed this endeavor, and also just getting, I guess, the final results of, what you were able to raise for, it was the Semper Fi fund that you were raising money for, correct?
Yeah, it was. Going into Pendleton, it was very surreal because they opened up the south gates there that go into right there by the pier or marina at Oceanside. And they had the MPs meet us right there and everything, and then escort us to the beach. And it was so crazy seeing the gates at Pendleton, because I hadn't seen them since I got out back in 2005. Mm-hmm. And in a way, it was like coming home. And it was just this sense of accomplishment. And, we said we were going to do it. We did it. And I remember riding out to the beach and that sand, and you see the ocean, and the riding Crow out into the water. And he, the only time he'd seen the ocean was once, and at the Atlantic, and he had his feet wet in there. And so the ocean is kind of a thing to horses. Like, water's not supposed to chase them. But, he was kind of shying at it a little bit. I just squeezed him up, asked him to trust me, and he just walks out there in the water and picks up his paw and just splashes the ocean, just paws the ocean. And it was such a cool moment that he's just slapping it, saying, "I'm here." And it was almost I remember looking at Kristen next to me and going, well, now what? We did it. We laid down 2,800 miles of horse tracks. Took 7 months. We did it. Now what? And it was very surreal. And then we loaded the horses up, came back to Colorado, and it took a couple months before the now what kind of came to fruition. It was a couple months after the ride. Another guy from my company killed himself. Which, by that point, we'd already lost more guys back home than we had overseas. And the now what turned into starting a nonprofit organization called Valhalla Ranch, where we bring guys out, get them horseback, do cowboy stuff, for lack of a better term. And so that's the now what. We get guys out here, and the horses really are the rock stars of the program, because going back to that, them sensing our energy levels, our demeanor, everything. You can take the most gentle broke horse in the world and throw a guy that's just in that super hyped up, super alert deal and put him on their back. And all of a sudden this horse goes, why is this predator so keyed up on my back? And they come up and they start to get a little agitated. And by the time you get that guy to calm down and relax, that horse feels it. And as soon as they feel that guy relax, that horse just melts. And it's this quasi-spiritual thing where just through your body language and how you are, you made 1,000 pounds of kill you relax. And it's so cool. And you know, the horses are definitely the main aspect to it. But, you know, we also have other things to do. We got to fix fence. We got to check cattle. We got to, you know, push them to water, switch pastures. And it's tiring stuff. And so guys come out, they get physically tired, which I feel makes us mentally tired and able to sleep. You know, because there's so many guys that can't sleep. Mm-hmm. But they're not doing anything to prepare themselves to need sleep. You know, staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning playing Call of Duty and drinking Red Bull, that's not very sleep inducing.
Not at all.
And you don't get any sense of accomplishment or satisfaction out of yelling at a 12-year-old on Xbox Live.
Right.
You know, but getting out there, you did something. You can look at that group of yearlings and say, we moved them 5 miles from this pasture to this pasture. We strung this fence. We rode this many miles. We did something today. And have a little accomplishment, have a little purpose, have a little mission, which I think that having the purpose and the mission part is so vital to guys coming back. And because we went from, you know, the combat environment where, you know, combat's easy. You know exactly what your mission is. You know exactly what your purpose is. You know exactly who you are. You know exactly that guy on your left and right will fight and die for you. And you come back and you're just adrift. And so finding that mission, finding that purpose, that's how we get to the next phase in life and continue on to being better people, you know, and finding out who we are after the Marine Corps, after the Army, whatever, you know, because it's, and I feel, you know, just based on my personal experiences, I think especially the Marines, you know, because once a Marine, always a Marine, which, right. Yeah, there is some of that's true, but man, strapping an 80-pound ruck on me and I'm going to cry, you know. I'm not that 20-year-old kid anymore. So I got to find who I am now. And I think when we're stuck in that, well, I'm a grunt, I'm a Marine. Yeah, dude, you were. And there's parts of you that still are, but you're not out there doing that anymore. Who are you day to day? And I think we got to find that and able to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, what I really like about this too is, you know, you're bringing these guys out there and not only are they establishing this connection, you know, they're kind of being reconnected with, you know, this tribe of warriors that they once belonged to. Because I imagine that's another thing that a lot of veterans, you know, struggle with is that they're part of like an elite class of warriors. And it's like, now what? I'm not part of my tribe anymore. But now you're getting reconnected with the tribe out there. And, you know, it's just, you know, some people might look at this and just be like, oh, you're just having them do like, you know, yard work and chores. It's like, well, no, we're getting them to produce tangible results.
Yes.
You know, you can see that fence, you know, being finished in the way it looks, and it looks great. And, you know, the animals get moved from here to there. And also it's just, I think kind of just sort of channeling their focus too, because I think that's another thing too. If they're just sitting idly by and they got so much stuff that's rattling through their brain, you know, that could lead to, you know, potentially destructive thoughts. But getting them out there, getting them focused on something, on a task, on a mission, as you've alluded to, there's just a lot of benefits that can be taken from that. And I would almost even dare say that, you know, there could be some civilians out there that can benefit from that same thing too, with all this like stimuli that we have in the world today with social media, negativity on mainstream media and just the works out there. It's like we're constantly being bombarded in this day and age.
Yeah, and especially one of the greatest things that the horse does is it requires you to be present. You take these guys that you put them on a horse and they're no longer walking some valley in Afghanistan or some street in Iraq or jungle in Vietnam. They are right here, right now in the present, because that horse requires that. And you have to listen to them. You have to feel them. You have to just be there. Otherwise, you come off, you wind up in the dirt. And so that's the thing. The most broke horse in the world might just plant your ass. And, which, get up, dust yourself off, go back for round two. And, but it brings them to the here and now, which is where we have to be. We have to be present. We have to be here. If we're living in the past, we never get better. And if we're only thinking about things that will be, we're not getting better either. What 2 weeks down the road looks like doesn't mean a damn thing if we're not here right now.
Right.
And so that's the greatest thing that happens. And, stretching barbed wire, it's kind of monotonous, but at the same point, you're still actively engaged in doing something, and it still keeps you here, which I think is what we need. We need to be here right now. So.
Absolutely. So now having the guys come out to you to Valhalla Ranch, how is that done? Do you have scheduled retreats every so often, or are you just kind of sort of open for people to come in to talk to you? How do you kind of have that structured?
Basically the way that we do it is we have the Facebook page. It's MK Horsemanship. So Mike Kilo Horsemanship / Valhalla Ranch. And, they get in touch with me there, and then we conduct a very, very structured interview where I talk to them on the phone, kind of like we're doing right now. And it's that they always ask, do I got to send in my DD-214? Do I got to fill out this paperwork? How's it go? We're doing it right now, man. It's we're not very structured at all. So because I find that like horses, you have the fundamentals that you do, but every horse is different. Every guy is different. Every guy needs different things, wants different things.
Sure.
And girl, I want to say girl too. So, I mean, we're not just male veterans. Just coming from the grunt world, it's hard. We just say guys.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
So the female veterans are welcome too. And not looked down upon at all. I know there's some of that stigma out there. If you strapped it on for your country, you're welcome here. So, but yeah, I mean, you can learn a lot by just talking to a guy and, or girl. And the DD-214, if we've been there, we don't really need proof of that. It's pretty easy to figure out the guys that are full of it.
Right.
So, and, they just come out and we kind of play it by ear, and we have a certain kind of bullet points that we want to hit, but how we hit them and where we hit them, that's up to how things go. So typically, we'll bring guys out if they're coming from a ways away. We have a bunkhouse, so they stay in the bunkhouse, and they'll be there for a week, 10 days, something like that. So.
Gotcha. All right. Very, very cool. Well, I'll get that linked up in the show notes for anyone listening if they want to go and check that out. That sounds pretty amazing. All right. Well, Matt, we're kind of starting to bump up against time here, but there's another question that I wanted to ask you, and I didn't prepare you for this, but I kind of thought of this early on in our conversation when you were telling the story about how, you made the phone call to, the VA crisis line, didn't really feel like they gave a damn, and you were maybe concerned that another veteran probably called that night too, and that was on the fence, and maybe that could have just ultimately been the deciding factor as to whether or not the person they were talking to gave a damn. But I can certainly tell that you do give a damn about the veterans and their welfare. So let's just say that if a veteran happens to be listening to this episode right now and they're on the fence themselves, what would you tell that veteran who's contemplating that?
Man, that's the tough one. We didn't leave each other hanging in the wind over there. Your boys need you. Don't leave them hanging in the wind here. There's so much cliche nonsense that comes down to it, but life is worth living. But you got to live to be part of it. And staying in the same routine that's just dragging you down isn't going to do it. Because if you don't change things, you might not do it today, but you will tomorrow. And so they got to take a look at themselves, see where they are, find out that most likely they're completely isolating themselves. They're alienated from the rest of their life. They're not living. They're not moving forward. They're stagnant. They're stuck. And that has to change. You have got to get out there. And, sometimes it takes doing something that's freaking nuts. Sometimes it takes saddling a horse, going from ocean to ocean to move past it. But tomorrow is worth it. It is. And don't leave your boys hanging alone. That I think that's the biggest thing, because once one drops, another one drops. Didn't leave them hanging there. We're not going to do it here. And I think that we have to continue to fight and live for each other. Beyond living and fighting for ourselves, we fight and live for each other, and then we get to live for ourselves. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense. I was talking to another guy about this, and I think that when it comes down to it, if the greatest thing that we're trying to live for is ourselves, we're going to fall short of the mark. If we live a life in service of others, trying to help others, ultimately we get more out of it than anybody ever will. But that's where satisfaction comes from. And I think that's what we got to do.
Yeah. The kind of how I describe that, there's been a couple of times in previous episodes where I've talked about, what it's like to be of service to others. And I always describe it as a carbon copy on your soul. You do these things for other people and you're not expecting anything monetary or tangible, like in return. But what you get from doing things like that is, you just uplift yourself just a little bit more. And just probably knowing that maybe that kind word that you said to someone, or greeting, let's say, the cashier at, the grocery store or something like that, and just seeing like that smile that just maybe adds a little bit of spark into their day, that leaves a carbon copy on you. And right. So I couldn't agree with you more that, continuing to live on and finding ways to continue to be of service to others, that's very good advice. So I really appreciate you sharing that, man. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, as we wrap up here, I just got a couple more questions for you. These are what I call my final three. This will be kind of wrapping up on a little bit of a fun note. I like to think that these questions are kind of fun. Every guest gets asked these three questions, so I'll ask you the same as well. And the first of them is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
Oh, man. If I don't say the barn where I met my wife, I'll be in trouble. But, the desert, dude, which is weird as hell to say. But riding through the desert, and I'm talking the wide open, can't see shit desert. Mm-hmm. It's nuts. It's spiritual. You feel like you are back in the 1800s. You can't see any civilization. You're just out there on a horse in the middle of Death Valley. It's freaking cool.
Yeah, that sounds pretty surreal. Awesome. All right. And the next question, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Whoa. Oh, God. I don't know.
It sounds like you kind of sort of already are doing that, like, right now. So with, with Valhalla Ranch and your current mission.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of, bucket list. I'd say like jumping out of an airplane, but I'd have to be dead to do that. I don't do heights, man.
Fair enough.
God, bucket list. I'd like to ride a horse across Scotland. I think that'd be cool as hell.
Dude, Scotland is beautiful. You'd love it out there. So
yeah,
all right.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good one.
Okay, right on, man. And the last question, this is a two-parter, and I think you kind of already answered this throughout our conversation, but I'll just go ahead and ask it anyway, just to complete the final three. And that is, what is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
Yeah, we got to go with the horse on this one. And no, I haven't. I haven't seen true wild Mustangs out in the wild. I rode one a lot, but I haven't seen them pre-capture, and I'd like to. We have a band here in Colorado on the West Slope. I may have to check that one off the bucket list.
Mm-hmm. There we go. We got another bucket list item then there too. Go see the wild Mustangs. All right, right on, brother. So now, before we close out here, though, where can our listeners go to connect with you? So you told us about Valhalla Ranch. Where can they find you on the interwebs? Are you out there on social media? How can we connect with you, brother? Yeah,
Facebook is the best. Like I said, it's Mike Kilo Horsemanship, so MK Horsemanship, dash Valhalla Ranch. The page that I had up during the ride was the Long Trail Home. And either one of those, I still monitor the Long Trail Home. So send me a message there and we can get something set up.
Okay. All right. I'll get all those linked up in the show notes. So that way the listeners can go and find them there. Well, Matt, I tell you what, brother, I really enjoyed this conversation today. Again, this was a very unique journey. And I just got to tell you what, man, I just really appreciate you and just how you're showing up in the world, how you are kind of sharing what you've taken from your own experiences. I know some of the things that you had gone through, those aren't always the easiest things to talk about, but, I think it can resonate with so many veterans out there, if they're hearing this. And so I just appreciate you just continuing to offer your services up and, being there for, these guys and gals who need it. So thanks a lot, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet, man. Like I said, they probably do more for me than I can ever do for them. So.
All right. Outstanding. All right. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate it.
You bet, man.
All right. Right on. Well, there you have it, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast is in the books. Now, what did I tell you? Definitely an amazing story, and I really hope you all enjoyed hearing Matt share it today. And I definitely encourage you all to go connect with him on his website, mkhorsemanship.com, and go check out the Long Trail Home Facebook page. You can find links to both of those in the show notes for this episode. And if you did enjoy today's episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. This is a weekly podcast. We got a brand new episode coming out every single Saturday. And we also have our Wisdom Wednesday segment that comes out every single Wednesday. And also, if you have a few moments, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating and review. Those ratings and reviews go such a long way to getting the word out about this podcast, so that way more people can find it and get some value from it as well. Also, let me know what you think of the All Around Adventure podcast. You can connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at All Around Adventure, and you can find me on Twitter at All Around Adven. Couldn't quite fit the URE on the username in Twitter, so just All Around Adven over there. Also, this podcast is one of a few free resources that we offer at All Around Adventure. We also have a private Facebook group called Travel Titans. It's a group that was created for travelers to share their stories, their tips and advice, as well as their inspiration pertaining to both travel and self-development, and we certainly welcome you to join us. And if you think that's something you'd like to be a part of, head over to facebook.com/groups/Travel Titans, and we look forward to seeing you there. And the last thing that I want to share before I close out here, again, I just want to thank you for being here today. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, but it just means the world to me that you've chosen to download and listen to this podcast and listen to what I had to say today and listen to what my guest Matt had to share. And I greatly appreciate it, and I don't take it for granted. And that's all I have to say for now. And I'll be back on Wednesday with my Wisdom Wednesday segment. And I'll be back next Saturday with a brand new episode of the blog readings. So be sure to check back in. But until then, I'm Josh Guerrero saying be safe, happy travels, and always move forward.